Last week, I was able to chat with the lovely Iona Italia. I've been talking in a few other interviews before this one about the IDW as a sort of way of doing discourse. And sorry to be clear, the IDW, I mean the intellectual dark web. And most people, however, who I have spoken to on Twitter or offline actually consider the IDW to be more of a group of people. And Iona is the first person that I've actually interviewed who talks about it in this way. And I really appreciated hearing her opinion. So we also speak about her latest book called Our Tango World. She reads an excerpt from it, and she has a lovely reading voice. So make sure you listen to the end, guys. To start, I have kind of been on a bit of a journey looking into what the IDW or intellectual dark web is actually. I've kind of come across two different interpretations. One is that it's a group of people. One is that it's like a way of doing discourse. And so I'm kind of talking to different people who are kind of part of it or adjacent to it and kind of have ideas about it. So that's what I'm just wanting to chat with you about that. And I'm happy to again move on to other things and stuff, but just to start, I was wondering if you could tell me about like what is it, what do you say that it is?
So I mean, I have nothing to do with the intellectual dark web at all, and I'm not even adjacent.
Oh, okay.
I guess the only thing is that I have a quite friendly relationship with Heather Hyink. But apart from that, I have no access to anyone else in the IDW. They're not going to respond to my tweets or messages or, I don't know any of those people at all personally.
So you think so you see a group of people when you hear IDW?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So I would say that the core members are the IDW is basically Jordan Peterson, Sam Harris, Dave Rubin, Eric Weinstein, Brett Weinstein, Heather Hying, and Barry Weiss and Claire Lehman.
Okay.
So that's the group. And then plus people who are who are both public intellectuals and the personal friends of some of the core members.
Right.
Might be included. So I think Eric said that he extended an invitation to John McWhorter and Glenn Lowry to join, quote unquote. And I think there was also one person who was in the original group and they wanted out, and that was gosh, what is her name? I'm sorry.
Oh, I know. She wrote that book, Galileo's Middle Finger.
Yes, exactly.
I can't remember her name. But yes, yeah. She was on the Femsplainers, Christina Hoff Summers, and Danielle Crittenden's podcast, and she said she backed out of being in the article. I think that Barry Weiss
being within the group. Shall I look that up?
Oh, sure, if you want. I'm just like, yeah, that lady. Yeah, we should get her name.
I read his middle finger, but I cannot remember anybody's name.
Yeah, I'd like to read it. I've heard it's really good.
Yeah, I'm afraid. Alice Drager.
Alice Drager. Okay, this is where it's nice to have for those podcasters who have producers that can look things up for them.
Yeah.
So it's just me though. Yeah. So
if we could turn into Joe Rogan, that would be wonderful.
I know. Oh yes. Oh, who could? Yeah.
The facts.
So okay. So what do you think about them as, I guess, a movement? Because we have many people who are, I guess, interested in the IDW and being part of it in the sense of like following it and looking at it as a way to be I don't know, to look into, I guess, advocates of free speech and people who are sort of here to show that you don't have to be worried about being honest about your opinions and that it's okay to disagree. That's sort of how I started out looking into it. Do you feel like that is, and I've heard people say that, oh, everyone can be part of the IDW. One of someone I interviewed a few times ago, Ryan Bennett, and then I spoke with someone else who's friends with him, Jay Shapiro, who they kind of see it as a way of doing discourse, and that anyone can be part of it if you just do this type of rigorous intellectual discourse, being open to debates and dialogue and stuff, right? So, like, what do you think about this?
I don't see it that way at all. So I think that I understand why it was done, and I think it was done for marketing purposes. And I'm not saying that in a cynical way, because I think that I'm also, a freelance writer and a podcaster, and everybody who is trying to work as a freelance public-facing intellectual obviously needs to market themselves. They need to earn money. And I don't see anything particularly wrong in trying to generate income by forming a group.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that it's a commercial brand, as it were, and it's specifically for that group that I already named, plus perhaps a few other adjacent people, like maybe Christina Hoff Summers might be considered part of that group. I don't think John McWhorter and Glenn Lowry are really part of it in any meaningful way. A couple of people also suggested Majid Nawaz might be part of it. But I think that you're part of it really if you're close friends in real life, or at least in real life know the people who are the central members. So it's like a little club. And I feel that it's had an inadvertently bad effect on discourse. And
really?
I say, again, I don't think there's anything sinister about it or wrong with having formed it. And I have separate feelings about separate members of the group. So I like Brett Weinstein. I haven't followed Eric at all, and I find his thought a little bit abstract and difficult to relate to. So he's not a thinker who immediately appeals to me.
Okay.
That's not to say there's anything wrong with what he's thinking or doing, but I personally don't follow him closely.
Mm-hmm.
Like Brett, I really like Heather and I both personally, and I also am an admirer of her writing and her work. So I'm a fan of Heather's. Let me see. I also listen regularly to Sam Harris's podcast, and I would consider myself a fan of Sam's.
Mm-hmm.
I find Jordan Peterson, I've softened in my opinions about him a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I used to find him just an intensely irritating, obscurantist, boring old fart.
Okay.
And politically just your basic normal religious conservative,
mm-hmm.
with a little bit of a philosophical sheen added on top. And I think there is more to his work than that. I've kind of softened about it, and I think that he fills a need, which is that young men need somebody inspiring, and he provides inspiration to a lot of young men who feel disenfranchised, who feel betrayed by the left. And he is an intellectual. He is a thinker. He is interested in ideas for their own sake. So that's Peterson. But Peterson's views, I would say I disagree with about 80% of them.
Okay.
I don't think there's anything sinister about him. I don't think that he is a fascist or anything of that kind, but I think he's an old-fashioned conservative religious guy with some, to me, partly not very interesting and partly just very frustratingly obscurantist in their expression ideas. And I really don't like ideas that are expressed. I really dislike obscurity for its own sake.
Okay, yes, yeah.
I'm not a huge fan. He's probably a perfectly nice chap.
Well, you're
I'd be
very fair how you laid it out, actually. You're very kind how you, yes, critiqued
Well,
him.
I'm sure if I met him, he would be quite charming, and I would be totally happy to drink a glass of wine with him.
Mhm.
But I'm not. It's not that style of work doesn't appeal to me.
Right.
Then, oh yes, Dave Rubin.
Mhm.
I really dislike what Dave Rubin is doing.
Okay.
I used
Lots are actually lately. Lots of
yeah,
people are critiquing him. Can you tell
yes.
me why?
So I used to follow his podcast right at the beginning. For about a year, I followed it, and there is the podcast has become more and more and more biased. So it's basically a place where he critiques the left. That is his entire thing. When he has right wingers on the podcast, and sometimes, frankly, pretty far right and out there crazy people, he either has done no research about them, and considering the amount of money he's earning to do that podcast, it is basically his full-time job. So he ought to be able to research his guests at least a little. Even I research my guests, and I'm earning peanuts for my podcast.
Right.
So Dave Rubin should certainly research his guests, because I saw how much money was in his Patreon, and for that amount of money, he could pay me. I would research them for him. So I don't buy this laziness argument. He just hasn't got time, doesn't have time to work out who it is he's having on his show.
Oh.
And if he had researched some of those who've been on his show, he should have questioned them about their less savory views. He should have at least brought them up in conversation. And I've also heard him just nod along and say, oh, yes, that sounds right, to the most crazy things. Like, for example, that American Jews fake all the hate attacks on synagogues and things in order to get more sympathy.
What? Who said that?
Obviously hear him. I can't remember now which guest it was. He's had so many crazies on the show, but I was quite surprised to hear him just saying, oh, yes, that sounds reasonable. I agree. But he says that to absolutely everybody. You could come on that show and say the moon was made of green cheese, and he would say, oh, yes, sounds very reasonable. I completely agree.
Yeah.
As long as you find a way to blame it on the left.
Right. Okay.
So, with right-wingers, anything will pass with him, anything at all, no matter how ridiculous or pernicious or even homophobic or anti-Semitic, even though he is a gay Jewish man.
Yeah.
He will just give it a pass, but everything that the left does is fiercely critiqued. So I find it, I'm bored by this one-sidedness. I think it's either extremely ignorant or disingenuous, and either way I feel there's no excuse for it at this stage. That doesn't, I should add that I have nothing against anybody who goes on the podcast. If I were invited on the podcast, which seems unlikely after this, but I would go on in a heartbeat. It's a great platform, and sometimes he does have guests who are interesting, worthwhile people, and when he does, I'm happy to listen to them. And I don't feel that it's a black mark against anyone to have been on Rubin. I think everybody should go on every podcast they wish and publish in any forum they wish. I'm interested in what the person themselves actually says and writes, rather than through what medium it was disseminated.
Right.
So just to be clear about that, but I'm not a fan of Rubin's. I also forgot that Ben Shapiro is a member.
How could we forget?
Yeah. And Ben, so I would say that I agree with Ben about free speech And I'll just put a full stop there.
Okay.
That is the only thing I've ever heard him. Actually, I not only disagree, I don't feel he even speaks any sense. I think he is a troll, and he's not. I don't feel he should be part of any intellectual web of any kind because he's not an intellectual.
Right.
And by that, I don't mean he's stupid. I don't mean he's an unintelligent guy, but he is not interested in exploring ideas for their own sake at all.
Okay.
He's interested in scoring points for his team. He is basically a partisan pundit.
Okay.
So I think he has nothing interesting to add whatsoever, nor does Rubin. What Rubin adds is his platform.
Yes. And Joe Rogan actually is also like technically part of it because of his platform, I think.
Oh, right. I'm very fond of Joe.
Yeah, I love him too. Yeah. Everyone really does. Everyone loves Joe Rogan.
Yeah, Joe also has all kinds of people on his podcast, but I feel that there's no pretense. So I feel that Joe is quite sincere, and that he is just chatting to people, whereas Rogan isn't. Rogan. Why do they have such similar names? Rubin is not just chatting to people. He has an agenda. And his agenda is destroying, quote unquote, the left.
Okay, so it's the agenda part that I think is getting in the way of. Is it perhaps the saying that, no, I don't have an agenda, I just want to talk to both sides? If he came out and said, oh, I'm actually a right-wing pundit now, would that help?
That would help, but I still feel some of the people he's had on the show have such disgusting opinions and views that he should have challenged them.
Okay, I see. Yes, and that's what I've been seeing people say on Twitter and just talking with people saying that he needs to at least challenge. I mean, you don't have to eviscerate someone, but at least say, that's not accurate.
Well, if you look at somebody like how someone like David Pakman does this, David Pakman has all kinds of people on the show. He's always very polite, but he's polite, but he's unrelenting.
Okay, I've never heard of him. I should check it out. What is he has a podcast?
It's called the Dave Pakman Show, or just the Pakman Show, maybe.
Okay, I'm gonna write that down. The Pakman Show, because I'm like, I'm a new podcaster, YouTuber, and I'm trying to navigate how to. I haven't disagreed tons with people I've had on, but I mean how to push back without being, like Jordan Peterson, Kathy Newman style, right? Like you don't want to just be like angrily pushing, and I would never do that, but it's a balance. I definitely want to. I don't want to be on either end of the not pushing enough or pushing too much, because that's not helpful really for the audience or for the person being interviewed. So
I don't know. I mean, I personally cannot do pushback. I'm not able to debate.
Okay.
So I just try to choose people to come on my show who with whom I'm in broad agreement, who I think have something interesting to say.
Okay.
Who I feel it's okay to give a platform to. Obviously, I don't do absolutely minute research, so it might turn out that some guest of mine has made some heinous remark in the past which I have missed. So I don't absolutely guarantee, but in general, these are people who I feel that I'm broadly in agreement with or broadly like. I had Jeffrey Sachs on the podcast, and I disagreed with absolutely everything he had to say. But
okay, how did you deal with that, though? Like, if you say you don't really want to do that, but...
Well, you see, I don't feel that Jeffrey is sinister, though. I don't feel that Jeffrey needs to be exposed.
Okay.
Or demolished in argument or anything like that. we had a totally civil conversation. We just disagree. We have roughly similar goals, but we disagree on tactics.
Okay.
Um, and I am about to have Armin Navabi on the podcast, and
Oh, great.
I was a little hesitant to
Yeah.
have Armin because I follow him on Twitter, and some of the things he has tweeted I've very much disagreed with.
Okay. Can you give an
But
example? Do you mind?
so I think that Armin has a very literal mind, I think, and is possibly on the spectrum. I don't think. I hope he's not listening to this, or if by saying this, but um, I notice a certain tone deafness to how things come across.
Mm.
And so, for example, he said that he feels that Judaism is worse than Nazism because more people were harmed by circumcision than were killed by the Nazis.
Oh, okay. Well, I think if we're talking about lives,
It was a really
yeah.
bizarre.
But that's
It was a.
hard. The tweets are hard to deal with when they say
So
such bold things.
I can kind of imagine knowing. Well, I don't know Armin personally, but having got a sense of Armin from following him over a few years, I can see how his mind worked. He's like,
Mhm.
okay, being killed is, let's say it's 50 points, and being circumcised is like 1 point. So then there
Mhm.
were 6 people killed. So if we
Okay, so
multiply
it made
that
sense. It
number
made
together,
sense. Mhm.
and then we take the number who are circumcised going all the way back to Abraham or
Yes. Okay.
whoever that was, and then we multiply that and we do the maths and we'll come up with a sum in which there's greater harm has been done by circumcision than by the concentration camps.
Right.
So I can see exactly how Armin would come to that kind of conclusion. I can also see why lots of people went crazy when he said this. So I was a little bit wary of having him on the podcast for that reason. But then I thought he does really important work,
Yes.
and I want to talk to him about Iran and about the movement against theocracy in Iran. And I think this is what he is doing to draw attention to that and to help people and to fight against this regime. Just so massive. I don't want to be like Armin doing a kind of mathematical calculation, but it so massively outweighs a poorly worded tweet
Oh, of
that
course.
I can't justify not interviewing him on the basis of some rather tone deaf tweets.
Right. Yeah, and that's very good. Good of you because it is you want to give a platform to people that you like you said that you find interesting or are doing important things or work that you want to bring to light, and so you could and it's okay to disagree is another thing. But you said you don't love disagreeing on your podcast, so how would you? Oh, sorry. What's the name of your podcast? Is T for two or two for two? Which is it?
It's called Two for Tea,
Two for
and
tea.
it's the Ario Magazine podcast. Maybe we can put this in the show notes.
Yes.
And it's on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher.
Mm-hmm.
I think Spotify now. Wherever good podcasts can be found, we can. I did want to finish what I was
Right. Okay. About yes.
Which is that the so I understand that it's kind of fun for them and nice that they're a group of friends.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel that the fact that they're a group of friends makes it very hard for them to have meaningful disagreement.
Right.
So they can disagree.
Okay.
They can disagree on kind of certain small things, and I can see why somebody like Harris would want to be in a group like that because he has faced so much bad faith criticism, so many ridiculous attacks, so much quote mining, so much falsifying of what he said, so many dishonest people smearing him that it's it's nice to be in a room with Jordan Peterson, with whom he might disagree, but Jordan is not going to smear him.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Mm-hmm.
Jordan is not going to make up a ton of bullshit about him and argue against things he's never even said.
Yeah.
Um, so I understand that, um, and but at the same time, what it means is that you can disagree on certain issues in a civil way. Like I disagree with Jeffrey Sachs, but you can't disagree with a person's the main thrust of a person's agenda or program or approach
Right.
or the real bedrock of their thinking. And this is a particularly acute problem when it comes to Dave Rubin and Ben Shapiro, who are to me the two dodgiest members of the group.
Right.
Um, and I can see that in particular in the way in which Sam Harris ties himself in knots not to critique Rubin.
Yeah.
He can't say anything against Rubin because they are personal friends. And I completely understand that. And I subscribe to E.M. Forster's view that, E.M. Forster famously said, if I were given a choice between betraying my country and betraying my friends, I hope I would have the courage to betray my country. So I totally understand that. You're loyal to your friends, and um, you can't attack your friends in that kind of radical way.
Okay.
And I've seen that people have begun to do this kind of critique. So in Quillette, Claire Lehman recently published Uri. What is his
Uri
surname?
Harris. I was going to ask you about what you thought about those two articles.
It's called. He has the handle Safe or True. She
Mm-hmm.
published those two articles critiquing the intellectual dark web by Uri Harris. I thought the articles were very mixed. Actually, I felt that he. I'll just say why I think. I think it's good that she published the articles because I was afraid that Claire would never be able to critique Rubin because of this friendship thing. And also, people don't critique Rubin because they want to go on his show, and if he's no longer friends with you, he won't invite you on the show.
Mm-hmm.
And okay, that's fair enough, but then he shouldn't be part of a discussion group because nobody
Right.
is disagree with him. That's not, you shouldn't have people in a discussion group who are immune from being able to be properly criticized.
Yes. Yeah,
That,
absolutely. Yeah. A fair critique from friends is actually the best critique because it's in good faith, right? So,
right. But, uh, you can't criticize Rubin. You can't just give Rubin a very, very mild criticism. He
you're right
does
because it's too
quite a
almost
sharp criticism, and he can't get that because he's everybody's friend.
right.
Um, so I thought it was courageous of Claire that she published those articles, and I thought it was really good because I would like to see opening up of more criticism. So I feel that it's lovely they're all friends, but being friends and having meaningful political debate are really two separate things. That's almost impossible to manage.
Okay.
And I don't feel they have managed it, frankly. That doesn't mean to say that they don't, as individuals, have valuable things to say. But for example, I don't find it helpful to hear Harris. I don't want to hear Harris talking to Peterson. I don't want to hear Harris talking to Rubin because I don't think it's interesting. Um,
Okay.
and I would much rather hear Harris's views. Um, and I think the reason he is touring with Peterson and Shapiro and people like that is not because they really have an interesting enough point of disagreement, but just because they're friends, they're buddies.
You don't
Um,
think that with their 2-hour discussion on truth was
I
that
thought
they
that was.
kind of disagree like quite a bit, it feels like to me. Like,
I nearly threw my computer out of the window.
I know, but that's the thing is like they butt heads on the truth thing and the God
That's true.
thing. But I
That's true.
suppose that's the one main thing for them. So if you've done it, you've done it, I guess. So, which they have with
But they
those.
haven't hit heads on any of the points of real contention of Peterson's. such as that everybody should be a Christian, that maybe men and women can't work together in an office setting, that, lipstick is a sign of sexual arousal. They haven't butted heads on any of the things that Peterson is most strongly critiqued for. This is not to say that necessarily those critiques are justified, but somebody who is really interested in thoroughly debating Peterson rather than just having a friendly chat would go for those points of.
Okay, I see what you're saying now. That makes sense. Okay, right. Like those are the things.
Same with Ben Shapiro, even more so, and even more so with Rubin. So I feel that it's, I feel you have to be, when you're friends with somebody, you have two options. Either you really have an extremely strong relationship where you can critique them at the most fundamental level, including their weakest points in their argument and their most controversial ideas, honestly and openly, and that's extremely rare, and I don't think any of them are managing that, and that's fine, because I think almost nobody can manage that. I see that very, very rarely. Or you don't really discuss politics with them, because you have to be extremely careful. You have to pussyfoot around, and this is what I do with my friends in real life. Many of my real life friends are very much social justice leftists. I don't agree with that stance, and I have once or twice been really honest about my disagreement, and it has cost me the friendship, so I'm never doing that again.
Oh, really?
I was really careful not to make it a personal attack. I didn't feel it as a personal attack, but nevertheless, it cost me the friendship. So since then, I'm just, if my friends are talking politics, I'm either sitting quietly, or I just agree wholeheartedly with the bits I can agree with, and the rest, or I avoid the topic altogether. So really, those are your two choices. But getting together a group of buddies and then saying we're going to do political debate, it's a kind of a tough one.
Yeah,
That's not to say nothing good has necessarily come out of this. I'm sure some conversations have come out of it, but if I were going to choose an interesting group of people to talk to, I wouldn't put Rubin and Shapiro in that group. And the fact that there are no social justice leftists in that group at all, that everybody, I think this was Uri's point. This was the point.
Yes, can you tell me a little bit about what you think about the articles?
So Uri's article, basically Uri said that the IDW are claiming, most of them are claiming to be on the left, except for Shapiro, obviously, and they're not on the left. And he's certainly correct that Shapiro, Rubin, who now says that he's supporting Trump, and some people are still trying to convince me that you can be on the left but be a Trump supporter. That just makes no sense to me. People tie themselves in so many pretzel knots to defend Rubin, and I'm really not sure why. Well, I know why his friends do, because I gather he is an extraordinarily charismatic person in real life, and everyone who's met him has fallen in love with him.
Yeah, I've actually met him after a Peterson. I went to a Peterson event in December, and he is really nice. I actually really like him. Like as a chat, he chatted with me and a couple other fans while he waited for his Uber. And it was really, it was just, it was nice chatting. Yeah, so yes, what you're saying, he is a very charismatic and fun individual.
Yes, and so I kind of don't want to ever meet him, because then I will fall in love with him. I'll become one of his,
okay,
against all my better principles. But Rubin, Shapiro, and Peterson are all conservatives.
Right.
That's not a dirty word, but that's just factually they're all right. And then Eric, I don't know. Brett and Heather are on the left, and who else was there? And Sam Harris is definitely on the left.
And Christina Hoff Sommers, I believe, is a Democrat. So
Right. I don't know that she's part of the group. I'm not sure.
right.
Oh, yeah. Barry Weiss, is on the left, and Claire is not on the left. I think she says she's center right
Oh,
leaning.
okay.
I don't remember, but I think she said, and I think she said in reply to the Uri article that she was not on the left.
Okay.
So I think that they're about evenly split between left and right.
Hmm.
So to describe themselves as being a group of critics of the left from the left is inaccurate. So Yuri is correct in that. I haven't heard any of them actually say that, but if people are saying that, that is inaccurate.
Hmm.
So that's the first point. But then Yuri goes on and he says the important division anyway nowadays between left and right is not on policies, but it's on uh, whether or not you are espouse social justice ideology.
Hmm.
Um, Now, first of all, as a general principle, I disagree because um, I am certainly on the left. I'm an old-fashioned tax and spend economic leftist.
Hmm.
I want universal free at point of use healthcare. I want universal free at point of use primary and secondary education, and universities I think should be free at point of use, but not universal. I think universities should exercise meritocratic selection criteria and should have quotas for their
Hmm.
different subjects, and then you should be able to get in or not depending on your grades. But I don't think there should be any tuition fees.
Okay.
So I also would like to see public transport everywhere. I would like all city centres to be pedestrianized, or at least to have a congestion charge. So only certain people, like emergency doctors and certain disabled people who rely upon their cars, should be allowed to use cars within the city centre. Everybody,
Really?
and I want the money to go towards public transport.
Okay.
I would like much, much stronger environmental protections. I'd like to see much stronger regulation of corporations. Um,
But you're a leftist.
that, these
That's
are
what
not,
that says.
these are not right-wing viewpoints.
Hmm.
I also would like to see handguns completely outlawed, and um, eventually I'd like the US to move towards a system where police are not armed either. That would obviously take quite a while. And I want all drugs legalized. I guess that's more of a libertarian position.
Mm.
Um, I also think abortion should be a matter of choice. And obviously, I support gay marriage and things like that. But I could be, social libertarian, but economic right winger. But I'm definitely not. I mean, I can't see any universe in which I would be on the right. But I also feel that social justice is a load of bollocks. So
Okay, can I just explain? It seemed like in Yuri's article, like he was saying people like what you are describing yourself as, and like maybe I'm center left personally, so I'm a lot of those things I'm not quite as far on, but quite similar views. So, but it seemed like what he was saying was the social justice left or the far left is now what is the left, and move over to the center right because that's where you are. That's how it felt like he was telling us, or people who are IDW or part of that sort of fandom, like who consider themselves classical liberals or
right.
traditional liberals, that you're not in the left anymore because the left has been taken over, so deal with it because you're part of the right now. That's kind of how it seemed to me. Did you get
Right.
that?
I think that was part of what he was saying, and in that part I think was wrong.
Okay.
But the other part of what he was saying is that the division that is relevant to the IDW is not right versus left.
Okay.
That they're not really debating on principles of right versus left, and this is one of the problems with the IDW. What they're debating on is social justice versus everybody who is not social justice
Yes,
left.
exactly. Yeah.
Basically, they are critics of social justice left. And whatever small disagreements they have between each other are dwarfed by their basic agreement on their main topic of discussion, which is the social justice left. And I think that is correct, that even though people like Brett and Heather, I think, are totally on the left and could be, part of a debate where they were opposing conservative viewpoints, but that's not what happens within the framework of the IDW. Obviously, they might do it on their own time, but the IDW is a group who have formed to criticize the social justice left. That's become their main agenda. And so because that's their main agenda, they're not really debating each other. They're not really discussing meaningful disagreements with each other, because their main topic is the social justice left. And when it comes to the social justice left, they're all in complete agreement. So they would need to have somebody who was a strong social justice leftist. They need to invite Ezra Klein to join, or
would he join? Like, would he, by join I mean just even debate them?
Yes, I think he debated them. I mean, he debated Sam Harris about the Charles Murray.
Oh, right. Episode. Oh, I forgot about that.
I think Ezra also has slipped a little bit away from the edge of the social justice left also. I feel Ezra's position has moved a little bit, I wouldn't say rightwards, because again, I think this is not the correct way of looking at it. He's still very, very much a normal economic leftist and social liberal, but I have noticed that he has become more skeptical of social justice ideas, and he's become a little bit less of an extreme proponent of that. So maybe Ezra isn't the best. They would need to invite Matthew Sears to become part of it.
Yes, because I wanted to talk to you about what you thought about his comments. And I actually do think that's a good idea. We need to have a back and forth that's civil. But from Matthew's tweets, I'm going to read, I have one of them, where he says, we should name every white supremacist, name every white writer, blogger, YouTuber, and politician that inspires them, plaster their faces in public, fire them from their jobs, hound them from restaurants, expose them and those that fuel them for their hateful, pathetic wretches that they are. And then he also talks about, and that includes all the little free speech club kids platforming white supremacist trolls as well. So, whoa, wow,
yes,
right?
Every little Sith Lord or something.
Yes.
Okay, so we should expose every white supremacist. I think I could be okay with that, though I feel like hounding them from restaurants and things is very counterproductive.
But what does he mean by white supremacist, though? What does he mean by white supremacist? It might not actually be our definition of that.
Right. Well, I think the danger point is that he says every white. Could you just read the first line or two of that tweet again?
Sure. He says we should name every white supremacist, name every writer, blogger, YouTuber, and politician that inspires them.
Stop there.
Okay.
So here's the problem. I think that it's that inspires them that is the big problem there.
Okay.
I'm getting old and I cannot remember the writer of this book or even the title of the book, but it's a book that is about art criticism, and there's a passage there which is about influence, and the writer says, it's about influence, but obviously it's relevant also to this concept of who inspires them. He says that we talk about somebody influencing someone else, using an active verb there, as if it is the person who, as if somebody is doing the influencing, as if the influencing is something you go out there and purposefully do to someone else. Whereas, for example, if I said my poetry was inspired by T.S. Eliot's poetry, T.S. Eliot has been dead for over a century. Well, he's been dead for some time.
Yes.
or if I said my poetry is inspired by Charles Simich's poetry. I mean, Charles Simic has never met me. He has no idea that I even read his poetry. So in what sense is he doing anything? It would make more sense to rephrase it and to say, I have borrowed from, plagiarized, drawn upon, parodied, pastiched, imitated, idolized, etc., the person's poetry. I'm the one who is doing the thing. If my poetry is influenced by T.S. Eliot, I'm the one who did something there, not Eliot.
Right.
And it's the same thing that is happening here, that you cannot know, all you can do. It's a classic Stoic fork situation. You have the things you have power over, which is what you yourself think, say, and do. To a certain extent, you have power over that. Let's not get into the whole free will question.
Okay, but yes, from you as a free agent within yourself. Yeah.
Yeah. If there's something you have control over, it's what you yourself think, say, and do. That is the basis of Zoroastrian religion. Good thoughts, good words, good deeds. That is your task. But what you don't have control over is how other people interpret your words, how other people twist your words, how other people quote, in what context they quote you, how they interpret you, and how you inspire them, how you influence or inspire them. You can make your own words as good as possible, but you only have control over what you yourself are saying.
Mm-hmm.
That is where the control ends.
Mm-hmm.
That is where your responsibility ends. So this is what really worries me, this kind of broadening out of responsibility.
Is it called negative responsibility? Is that like a...
Yeah, it's like somebody took some small part of something you said out of context and it inspired them to do something terrible. Mm-hmm. And therefore you are to be blamed. And you, in Matthew's book, are one of the people who should be hounded out of restaurants and your life made a misery, and your name, you have to wear the scarlet letter and your name will be proclaimed by the town crier and mm-hmm. you're an ostracized person. That, I think, is very, very unfair and very worrying to mm-hmm. me. It is the kind of adjacency thing that really concerns me, especially considering how easy it is to quote mine and to take things out of context. And worse things are coming down the road. Very sophisticated techniques of falsifying audio and video are coming.
Right. I've heard that.
You cannot trust a third party's interpretation of someone. And it doesn't matter if that third party is a critic or an adulator. So not only can you say, well, these wonderful people tell me that Andrea is a total bitch and therefore I must believe it.
Right.
Not that, but also these horrible people really like Andrea, so she must be really suspicious. Mm-hmm. You don't have control over who likes or dislikes you and what is said about you. You can only control what you yourself say. That is all. Mm-hmm. That's my take on that.
Yes, and so, but the thing is that I have a sneaking suspicion that he probably wouldn't be willing to talk to anybody in the IDW or in the kind of space that you and I are talking about being open to debate differing views. It seems like Matthew Sears wouldn't do that. Do you know what I mean? Hence it being difficult to have dialogue with someone on the SJW or far left.
I think that's true. And, I was really happy that Jeffrey came on my podcast, even though we've had a few quite unpleasant clashes on Twitter before and since, and we disagreed throughout the podcast. Mm-hmm. Nevertheless, even though occasionally things have become a little acrimonious between me and Jeffrey, I really value him because he was willing to come on the podcast and he is willing to engage.
No, I didn't know. So Jeffrey considers himself on the far left?
Far left, no, because he's not a tanky or a communist or anything, but right. He is much a social justice leftist.
Oh, social. Okay.
I really appreciated that in him because one thing he's very open. Because one thing that I have noticed is that the social justice left, but not Jeffrey, the social justice left obviously is not a monolith.
Right.
So, I have a friend who is very, very social justice-y, but he also told me he thinks that cultural appropriation is bullshit, is a bullshit concept.
Okay. Right.
So, not everybody is following exactly the same rule book. Clearly, people have different degrees and different opinions.
True. That's good to point out.
Yeah, it's a social justice left is not a group of people. It's a way of thinking that some people subscribe to more and some less, and you can see it in certain ways of looking at things. And I mostly dislike it. Occasionally, I feel like it's the right approach, but mostly I find it an unhelpful approach.
Okay.
And sometimes I think it's a downright pernicious approach, but it depends absolutely on the case-by-case analysis. But one thing that I noticed that is very widespread among social justice leftist thinkers is this idea of adjacency.
Yes.
That you are to blame if you engage with people who are unsavory in some way. And it can become this kind of endless chain, because if you become unsavory by engaging with unsavory people, that means that if somebody else has engaged with somebody unsavory, then you shouldn't engage with them. So, you can kind of, there are then fewer and fewer people it's who you can engage with without it becoming a contagion.
Right. Contagion is the operative word, yeah.
So we saw this really clearly with, for example, the YouTuber Natalie Wynn, who calls herself ContraPoints, who is a trans woman, makes some very detailed, very elaborate, and very aesthetically carefully thought out YouTube videos. I would say that she is part political commentator and part artist. She definitely has a sort of artist sensibility in her approach.
Okay, I've never seen her videos. I should look.
Oh yeah, I'd recommend it. She is definitely on the social justice left, and I find her thinking sometimes unsophisticated. But she's an artist. You will see it's an art project. Her YouTube channel. It's not just a political commentary. Things like the exact lighting and shade of lipstick that would be correct for this scene, and the characterization, the costumes, all these things, the music, all these things are extremely important to her. Anyway, she was interviewed by Jesse Singal.
Okay.
And Jesse was and continues to be extremely sympathetic to her and supportive of her. And she was very pleased with the interview. She felt she said exactly what she wanted to say. She was not in any way misrepresented. And then afterwards, people got very angry with her for having been interviewed by Jesse, because Jesse is persona non grata among some trans.
Oh, yes. Right.
Because he has written some pieces about detransitioning. And some people in the trans community feel that detransitioning is not a topic that should ever be mentioned in public, because otherwise people will begin to think that all trans people detransition or just need to detransition or whatever.
Okay.
It's they feel that it threatens trans people, because if people know that detransitioning is a thing, which clearly for some people it is, some people do detransition, then they will just demand that all trans people detransition, and also the trans people will be gone.
Right.
It would be like, how people used to say that homosexuality was just a phase. What if for some it was just a phase and somebody wrote an article about that?
Right. Okay.
That's their argument. I disagree with it, but just to outline that that's their argument. But he didn't mention detransitioning in the interview with Natalie.
Okay.
And but she received so much criticism for just having been interviewed by him that she basically disowned him again. And she said, even though all of her dealings have been pleasant, she decided that she actually hated him because clearly she really ought to.
Oh, that's so sad.
So I think this is the adjacency problem.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes it very hard to have a discussion across those lines.
Yes.
Which is why I can understand that the IDW don't have a social justice leftist in their group.
Mm-hmm.
A social justice leftist who joined the group would be ostracized by the rest of the social justice left.
Mm-hmm.
This is a big problem.
So, yeah, this is the problem that we've been trying to figure out lately, it seems. Well, I watched the debate between Christina Hoff Sommers and what's her name? Roxane, yes, Roxane Gay. It was rough, I'd say. I don't know, have you looked at it yet?
Yeah. Well, I read a long series of tweets about it. Somebody live tweeted the whole event.
Okay. So you probably got the gist of it. I mean, it wasn't bad to start off, but as it went on, I mean, just by reading Roxanne's body language of like, it's kind of like can you imagine if I was doing that during our whole interview when you were saying things like,
Helen always, Helen Pluckrose always sighs and tuts when I was saying things. Well, not always, but quite often.
But you know how people are feeling.
That's just her manner, though.
Well, I suppose,
but mostly it's just her way. But it was very off-putting at first.
Well, maybe I'm being a bit hard on Roxanne's body language, but she basically said near almost the end that she didn't know who Christina was when she agreed to debate her, and maybe we all make mistakes. Like, as in, like, it was a mistake to debate Christina, and and then she said it again the next night because they showed different clips from both nights, and someone asked about the adjacency thing. Do you think that it's problematic, as one of Roxanne's fans, do you think it's problematic to be on the same platform as someone who's the adjacency, being adjacent to someone whose ideas you absolutely don't endorse? And Roxanne, she was like, well, of course, she's in a pickle because she's sharing a platform with Christina with whom she very much disagrees. So she's like, I don't think it's a problem. I don't think it's wrong. No. But that's a fair question. And, we've got to think about this.
Oh, so that's rubbish on this side of my...
I know. And Christina was like, okay, this is just getting rude now. She's like, I'm right here. Like, and like the audience is just booing her, not booing, but like, oh, like just making it very vocal whenever Christina would make some points that were reasonable, whatever. So, but it wasn't a debate though. It wasn't. It was just people saying, I think this and I think this. And it wasn't really like what you're talking about, the kind of, oh, we disagree, but like, what are we even working towards? Like they didn't really agree on what they're even talking about, because feminism, they don't agree on the definition of feminism.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's very difficult to get anywhere, even though I applaud both of them for actually continuing to do it, to try.
Well, yeah, at least she did the debate.
Yes, maybe that's something that needs to happen. Like, we need to search out and find these people, like what you were saying, even say like Ezra Klein, even if he has moved a little bit farther away from where he was. But maybe we need to try harder. Maybe the IDW should sort of have that be their mission, to try to find someone to be part of them who is on the social justice left.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Ezra, I listened to Harris's podcast with Ezra, and I, even though I'm more on Harris's side, I still feel like he was overly harsh on Ezra. I think Ezra is one of the more reasonable voices on the social justice left.
Okay.
And there must be other people too.
There must, yes, I know, that's exactly what I was like. There must be. We just need to double down and find them. Okay, well, actually, I wanted to talk to you about your book.
Oh, yes, sure. So my new book that I recently...
Our Tango World, I think, right?
Yes.
That's the latest?
Yes.
Okay.
So I've recently written a book about Argentine tango.
Okay.
And it is not an instructional manual. It is about the culture of Argentine tango. So tango has a very intricate and involved history and culture. And it's also about the experience of being a dancer,
Okay.
how it feels to be a dancer.
Because you are yourself a dancer.
I'm a dancer and
Yeah.
teacher of Argentine tango, and I live in Argentina, obviously, here in Buenos Aires. So it's intended to be not just for dancers themselves, but for anybody who is interested in that world, that society, that culture. And if you like, maybe I should read a little passage.
Yes, please. Yeah, because I don't know anything about this, and it seems very vibrant and very interesting to me. So
And one thing is that I find that tango is one of the most misunderstood cultural phenomena. It's one of the most abused words.
Oh.
So even though um, even though people know that I dance tango, they still say to me, "Oh, I found a tango here, and I'm sending it to you." And I always tell them, "It's not going to be tango what you found. You know, if you want to know what tango music is, ask me. If you want to know, if you want to see tango dancing, I will show you. I will show you videos of the tango dancing." But people are very, very confused as to what it actually consists of.
Okay.
And so they think that it's women in slit skirts with really angry expressions, or that it's this weird dum 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 music.
Yeah.
We don't dance to dum dum music.
Okay. Where did that? Is that sort of through movies? I guess.
I think that is from ballroom tango. So I'm not sure when ballroom tango began, but um, I think it began in the U.S. and then became popular in Britain later. They wanted to have a dance that would fit in with the other 10 dances that they have in ballroom.
Okay.
And ballroom dances have very strict rules that they follow. And tango doesn't follow any of those rules in its original form. Here, it's very much a folk dance. It's not primarily for show. It's not primarily for competition. You don't wear any special costume. You just wear whatever clothes that you can move in. People of all ages dance it. It's an urban folk tradition here in Buenos Aires, and it's also danced in this very close embrace. So when you see movie versions of tango, or what people think is tango, and they're kind of leaning back away from each other or looking to one side, it looks very artificial and weird.
Okay.
Whereas the way that we dance tango is in this very close, what we call close embrace, which is it's the nearest thing you can get to a real life hug while still being able to move without obstructing your or the other person's movement.
Okay. Oh, wow.
And we'll put a video in the show notes. But it has a very, because of this embrace, so your faces are maybe touching, you're touching the body, you have your arms around the person or one arm around the person, but you're not doing any kind of stiff posture thing. You're really holding the person.
I see.
It's a uniquely addictive dance for that, I think largely for that reason. Because so I'm going to read a little passage just to give you a taste
Yes,
of
please. Yes.
So in this story, I'll just give you a tiny bit of background so you can understand it. The story is set on a prison ship.
Okay.
In nature, as you'll notice, and the protagonist, who is a man, so just use your imagination, even though I'm going to read it in my own high-pitched girly voice, but it is a narrator, is a prisoner on the ship. It's called Paper Moon. Lamuto with Omar, I ordered. Orchestra Francisco Lamuto, singer Jorge Omar. The silky voice parroted. Lossy as usual? Oh yeah, what the hell, give me lots of crackle. Years? You choose, I told it. and the words floated in front of me on the air like a hallucination. Selected, attractive. I wondered what it must have been like in the old days, when a pot-bellied, shiny-pated man sat in a dimly lit eyrie in front of a nippled console, the light from an ancient computer screen illuminating his serious face, reflecting off twin earpieces round and shiny as the eyes of a fruit fly. When, instead of letting Milena analyze BPM, tonal color, use of orchestration, mood, and lyrics, and select the ideal combination of tracks, some semi-drunk downed their fourth beer and put tracks together at random. When, instead of taking readings of the dancers' pulse rates, hormonal levels, and neural activity, some skinny geek boy surveyed the floor and tried to guess that the energy levels were low and that people needed a D'Arienzo tanda to get them up and moving. I bent down and retied a shoelace, which was already perfectly adjusted. After all these years, this still made me feel a little self-conscious. But now the opening bars were sounding, and I heard the familiar insistent stompiness of the introduction, the buzzy accompaniment like a skeptical humming, a murmur of disagreement, the sweetness of the violins, punctuated by the lightest ripples on the piano, the bubbliness of bandoneons. And there, sitting across the room, I spotted her, the companion of my own nightly nostalgias, my fellow time traveler. I feel just as I did at primary school, when we bounced and rolled around on the giant grid-marked trampoline, while a hologram of a man in a strange metal chair, squashed, ugly face held upright by two padded black headrests, grey-blue eyes wide and playful behind round glasses, talked of black holes in a slurred voice. I have forgotten all the physics I learnt at school, but I remember this, the joy of grabbing handfuls of the shiny stuff, of that hammock of space-time, and twisting and folding and rolling it into tubes. And I wanted to do that now, to burrow through like a hamster, to wriggle out into another era, when a G-type star was still burning hydrogen in a nearby galaxy, when men with otter-sleek hair and pencil moustaches danced with women in silky skirts and strappy heels, when I still lived on the orbital, when it hadn't yet happened, before everything changed for me. She felt so alive in my embrace, the smoothness of her cheek against mine, the ticklishness of fine hair against my skin, the face snuggled against mine, the skin of her back damp beneath my fingers. I paused, waiting to begin the dance, and I felt her free foot sliding playfully up her standing leg, just as a violinist's invisible bow traversed a string, as if it were the friction of her suede sandal strap against her skin that was producing the sound. And then I pushed the floor away from my standing foot like a diver bouncing off the high board, and took that first sidestep of the dance, plunging in. She was encircling me, letting her hand reach deep over my shoulder, and her body press firmly against mine, arousing 100 memories of friends hugging me warmly, of letting me feel, through muscle and fat and matter, their affection, their regret, their sorrow, their commiseration. Her right hand curled around mine like a lover's, like a mother guiding a child. But I knew that the intention was different. This was the ravenous but unself-conscious physicality of a child on a climbing frame, of a dog snuffling up the scents of a stranger. It was an eager desire to listen, to trace the to trace the raised dots of the body's braille. It was not cuddles, but communication. It was a game of let's pretend, the two of us life-size dolls, Ken and Barbie for the quantum tunneling age, a game played with the fierce-eyed earnestness of children. We were like twin scholars in an ancient archive, in some primitive civilization in which verbal expression still took a physical form, in which thoughts were embodied and recorded by fingers dancing over soft black keys like the hands of a silent pianist. when the letters appeared one after another, like notes, D's like minims, O's like semibreves, full stops like the dots of jaunty syncopations, unheard melodies of thought. The music unfolded, tightly structured like a poem. Its repetitions were like rhymes, its harmonies like layers of double meaning, its counterpoints like contradictory readings. And as we read, we commented, we criticized. Listen, she seemed to tell me, that word there, it reminds me of these synonyms. It's rich with those associations. It's reminiscent of these contexts. It ties in with this earlier line. It contrasts with that meaning. It was a somatic, practical criticism, a close reading in close embrace. We interjected, we pointed out, we demonstrated, we annotated, we scribbled in the margins, we circled, we underlined, we highlighted, we vandalized, we dog-eared. And I loved our reading more than the original poem. The author was dead, and we were dancing around his grave, picking the dead roses of youth to make a potpourri. But now, all too soon, the cortina was sounding. It wouldn't be make-believe if you believed in me, the singer crooned. Ha ha, very funny, I told Milena. You have 10 seconds, it told me, and I shut my eyes. I didn't want to see everything fading, growing two-dimensional, turning black and white. I dislike the shadows, the afterglow, the halo effects like the early symptoms of a migraine. Symptoms of this continued sickly mumbling which we call neural reality. The music faded out and fell silent. You have used up your supply of ivy and swingers for this rotation, Milena informed me. I wriggled a little against the slippery buttock hollows of the armchair and glanced around the rec room at the others, waking groggily with disappointed frowns or lingering smiles from their respective solitary dreams. I'm sorry, it said. I can give you audio only. I got up heavily and then sat down again. The soft black suede shoes were still on my feet. With a tug, I untangled the bunny ears of a lace. Prisoners must now return to their duties. The words flashed on the ground in front of me. Okay, I said. Go ahead. Play.
Oh, that was, oh, you write exquisitely and you read exquisitely. It was wonderful. I was like in a dream. Very.
It's a dead end. It's this dead end genre of tango themed science fiction.
I know. I actually was like, I had to stop and be like, is that what I think it is? Like, I'm like, oh, it is. Awesome. I love that you sort of married your two loves, because I know you're a Trekkie fan.
Yes, I am.
I am as well. But yeah, that's awesome. I actually did. There was something that came to mind. A question you mentioned about, I guess, communication almost within in that excerpt. So is that something that is misunderstood about tango, about the way it is, how the sort of intimate communication that is found within it?
Yes. So one of the things about dancing very close, or a lot of the time we dance very close, is that you can really easily feel the little pre-movement preparations of the other person's body. Mm-hmm. Tango is led and followed, and leading and following does not involve any form of physical force. It's a communication. It's leading is like a small hint. And the way that it works is, so for example, if you're leading a step, which is just the man steps, or the leader could be a woman also, mm-hmm. but say the man steps forward, the woman steps back, then what is happening is that as you prepare to step forward, there's a little preparatory movement in your body, which your partner can feel. So she begins by extending a leg, a free leg, mm-hmm. Which will give you space to step into. Mm-hmm. So you can step then right underneath her shoulder because her leg is already back out of the way. Okay. It's extremely intuitive. So you are responding to a movement that you're feeling in the other person, and that movement is not a kind of extra signal that's given to you. In the way that, for example, in salsa, you lift your arm for the person to turn. This is a lead, a classic lead. It's not part of the leader's dance in a sense. It's, it's the signal for you to turn. This is a little bit different because it's your own movement, but the little preparatory moments in your own movement are giving the lead to the other person.
Okay.
And there is quite a lot of freedom. This is true of other partner dances too. I think that one of the things that people misunderstand when they watch tango and they haven't danced it is they think that everything is led in the sense of decided by the man. But in fact, when you're dancing, you're both listening to the music. And for example, as you're coming to the end of a phrase and you're slowing down that step before the end of the phrase and coming to a little short pause, are you doing that because the man is leading that? Or are you both just doing it because the music is sounding? Or is it even the case that the man may have forgotten for a moment that the phrase is happening, but as he feels you slowing, he's also going to slow? It's really hard to disentangle those kinds of things when you are dancing together and letting you dance. And I think the other thing that people often don't realize is people think that the dance is choreographed when they see performances, but most performances are fully improvised.
Really?
Yes, it's actually easier to dance in improvisation than choreography, I think, because with choreography, you have no second chances. If you know you want to make X movement at X second, you had better do it. If you don't, the whole thing is going to be fucked up.
Yes. Yeah.
When you're improvising, if in that moment you are in the right position and comfortably able to do that movement and it feels right, you do it. But if you're not, then you don't. And there's nothing has gone wrong, as it were. So improvising is, in some senses, riskier, but it's also, in many ways, easier.
So you prefer improvising?
I prefer improvising. I would say that improvising is like chatting rather than reading a script. In a sense, reading a script can be easier. So if you're giving a talk, you may find it easier to have a written version of the talk. But if you're in conversation with another person, then it's easier to just ad-lib the conversation than be trying to remember your lines. So when you're in a choreography, it's like you're two actors playing a scene and you have lines to remember, and other actors have cues that they are waiting for, etc. So in some ways it's easier, in some ways harder. And also, just as with script, if you've ever done theatre, which I have, I used to do theatre, and
I could tell the way that you read your story so well. Like, oh, she knows how to do this.
But in theatre, you're doing the scene for the 500th time, and it's like you need to keep the emotion fresh.
Yeah.
So the same things happen with choreography. You want it to look fresh, but you're doing it for the millionth time. And it's also they're professional choreographers, so very often you haven't written that choreography yourself, but you have to make it look like it's really organic to you. You have to embody it. So there are different types of skills, but most dance and most tango is improvised, and all of my performances have been improvised.
Okay.
Talking of the IDW, just coming full circle, showed a performance that I did to Brett Feinstein, and he said, I can't believe this can't have been improvised. I don't believe it was improvised. And it's really a very simple performance that nobody who knows tango would even think was choreographed, because why would you think something so simple? But it's because the music is the other element. And I'm going to tell a little story about that specific performance, and maybe you can link it, and I'll give you the relevant timestamp.
Yes, send me the link,
Yeah, people can see in real time from the timestamp what I mean. I'll give it a description here, but it'll be clear if you watch and see that timestamp.
Okay.
This was improvised, and also my partner, who is my dance partner in India, his name is Manish Dharmani. Manish had not heard that piece of music before. we were listening to it. We listened to it a couple of times in the Uber on the way there. We'd been planning to dance to something else, and we had practiced to different music. And on the way there, I suddenly remembered that I really loved this particular tango, and very few people had performed to it. So I said, Manish, let's swap. I want to dance to this instead.
Mm-hmm.
So the Uber driver played it for us twice, and then we went in and danced to it. So it was very fresh for him. I knew it well.
Mm-hmm.
At one point in the music, there is a set of what are called triplets. It goes bum, 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 bum. That's a triplet where you have three notes where normally you would have two.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of bum, you know, bum, 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 bum. And it's often used for a very dramatic effect in tango, the moment of triplets. And at that point, by coincidence, I was in a place where my free leg could decorate using Manish's free leg. So his leg is like this, and I went up his leg with my foot going boom, boom, boom.
Yeah.
Boom, boom, boom.
Okay.
To the bum, 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 bum music, and then I stepped over the leg. It's a common move in. Being in this position is a common place to be in tango, and it's a place where as a follower you can put decoration. So I put this decoration. So Manish knew that another boom, 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 boom was coming. In music, things tend to repeat in pairs. I stepped over, and then he led me round, and he led so that I was in this equivalent position, but on the other side of his body with the other leg.
Okay.
And so it was here. And
then you did boom, boom, boom.
Here, as the boom, 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 boom happened, knowing that then I would go boom, 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 boom on the other leg.
Okay.
So that is the kind of thing that people look at. I'm using this example because of my own performance because I know it, but much complicated things can be improvised.
Thank you. I really liked the reading, and I knew nothing of dance, let alone Argentine tango. So I know infinitely more than before with our chat. So thank you so much for chatting today, Iona. I really appreciate you giving me your time.
You're welcome. It's my pleasure.